In Jesus' day, and in the many centuries before Jesus' day, in the Jewish faith, there were three groups of people who needed the special support, attention, generosity, and love of the entire Jewish community. They were widows, orphans, and strangers. And in the first reading, we have all three. We have this widow, and she has a son. So he really was an orphan, since without any parent, but still without a father. And we have a stranger in the prophet of God, Elijah. Now, as you heard, there was a great famine in the land, and the woman and her son were getting ready to have their last meal, and then she was going to die. You see, because in those days, women could not work, so when the husband died, she couldn't go find a job and get a salary that way. She had to depend on maybe her adult children, other relatives, and the generosity of the local synagogue. But during a famine, everybody was hurting, especially the poor. So she was ready to have her last meal. And along comes this stranger. I don't know if she knew he was a prophet, even knew his name, Elijah, but she remembered her Jewish faith. You must welcome strangers no matter the cost. So she felt her first obligation was to welcome Elijah. And the request he made sounds rather, maybe even selfish to us. He said, I know you and your son are about to die because you're running out of food, but could you fix me a meal? Well, I think Elijah knew what he was going to do. Maybe he was testing her faith, and she responded generously. She made him a meal, and he said the flour and the oil will last for a whole year. She trusted completely in God and the man of God, Elijah, this great prophet. She was willing to sacrifice her life, her son's life, in order to follow the Jewish tradition of welcoming the stranger into your home. And he followed the Jewish tradition, Elijah, of taking care of the widow and the orphan. A beautiful testimony to the faith of the Jewish people and their generosity and love towards others. Now in the gospel, we also have a widow there. And she also trusted God totally. Jesus sat opposite the treasury. I don't know if it was a basket like we have here or whatever. And he was kind of watching, not checking it out, not saying who gave a lot and who gave a little. But it's kind of looking at the pattern. He said, interesting. Thanks be to God, many wealthy people gave large amounts of money. Synagogue needed that. But he said, even the widow put in just a couple of coins worth 2 cents. And he commended her because she gave her last 2 cents, whereas the wealthy people, thanks to them and their generosity, gave from their surplus wealth, the extra wealth. So there's several lessons to learn from these two readings. The first reading, the gospel. Are we willing to put all our trust in God? As the widow in Elijah's time, who was willing to give this stranger who came to her home of food, not knowing if she'd have any for herself and her son, but she trusted somehow this man of God would bless her. She put her trust in God, and she was rewarded. And likewise, the widow in the story of Jesus' time, again, these are true stories, not parables. She knew maybe the synagogue needed money, maybe they were having some special program or whatever. She thought, well, I'll put in literally my 2 cents, and somehow I'm sure God will take care of me. We don't know what happened to the widow in Jesus' story. My guess is that because she was so generous with her couple of pennies, that he told the apostles, let's go to her house and bring her some food and take care of her. So we need to have that ultimate trust in God, especially when we have doubts, when we're not sure, if we're going to make it through this particular crisis, even this pandemic in which we're still involved in for way, way too long. Trust in God that somehow we'll get through this, and maybe we'll even be better persons because of this. Because I think sometimes problems, tragedies, catastrophes, mistakes can make us stronger individuals because we learn from our mistakes, we learn from those tough times, and we appreciate the good times when they do arrive. But the other lesson that's from these two readings is the importance of quality over quantity. Quality over quantity. If you go out to the lobby and make a left turn heading back towards my office or the restroom, the little kitchenette there's a wall. It's called the donor wall. And on the donor wall are hundreds and hundreds of names of people who contributed to the building of this church building, prior to its opening in June of 2018. When I sent the list to the firm in Ohio that made that donor, they said, wow, that's a long list. Most parishes, have a limit. You don't get your name on the list unless you've given a certain amount of money, $1,000, $100. And I said, no. I said, if a person gave $1 to a building fund or 6 figures to a building fund, their name's going on the list. And so there are people who gave quantity-wise a small amount, others who gave quantity-wise a large amount. But they all gave of their generosity. And maybe those families or couples or persons that gave just a little bit had made as much of a sacrifice as those who gave, again, 6 figures. All are equally part of this church building coming into existence. Every single one is important. Last week, Tuesday through Friday, I was at a retreat center in the San Bernardino National Forest with about 35 students from Gorman High School and 10 faculty members. And one of the faculty members, presented this kind of question to the students. And you've all heard this question before, I'm positive. The first question was, if your house was on fire and you could take only 3 things out of your house, not including people or pets. Naturally, you're going to take family members out and we're going to take our pets out. So excluding people or pets, what 3 things would you take if your house was on fire? And they all gave wonderful answers. Many of them said, I would take photo albums. My grandmother has photo albums, and I would take those. A couple said their iPhones, not because of iPhones, but because the iPhones are full of photographs, full of pictures, full of, conversations between them and their loved ones. None of them said, I'm going to take expensive jewelry. None of them said, I'm going to take the expensive car. It was all things that meant something to them. Maybe at a flea market, a garage sale, these items wouldn't bring in any money or very little amount of money. But they were valuable beyond price because they reminded them of their relationships. The second question, again, you've heard this before. If you had one day to live, how would you spend that last day of your life? And again, the kids came up with the right answers. I'd spend time with my family. I'd talk to people if I couldn't visit with them personally, either by text messages or social media. I'd accept the apology of people that I haven't accepted the apology yet. I'd make my apology and ask for forgiveness for the people I've hurt. We'd have a simple meal together. Again, all qualitative things. They didn't say, I'd make sure I invested in the stock market, or I'd make sure all my money was in order or whatever. That wasn't a concern to them. So I'm going to give you that challenge this week. During the week, either just by yourself, a journal, or maybe as a family, maybe a family activity. Tonight, tomorrow, sometime during the week. Ask those questions. If our house was on fire, and each of us could take only 3 things from the house, excluding people and pets, of course you're going to take them, what would those 3 things be? I think you'd come up with similar answers. So the lesson from the readings today is really part of our natural love of our relationships. Things that remind us of those people we love. And the second question, if you had one day to live, how would you spend that last day? But wait a minute. Why don't you do that now? You may not have a last day. You could die of a heart attack, so could I. Tragic accident, like that. Don't wait till you have one day to do all the things you should do all the time. So maybe this week, apologize to someone that you've hurt. Accept the apology from someone who's begging to be forgiven. Make reconciliation happen. Spend quality time with your family. If you can't do it in person, text message, social media, whatever. Don't wait till your last day. Why not every day? Tell the ones you love that you love them and mean it. Powerful lessons from the Gospels and the first reading. Trust in God like those 2 widows and place quality over quantity. Our relationships are priceless. Bless them, thank them, love them.